Welcome, friend, and thank you for joining me tonight. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? It is always remarkable to think of so many listeners spread across the globe, connected in this quiet moment of history. Tonight, we turn our attention to the Mongol Empire, an empire that rose from the windswept steppes of Central Asia and grew into the largest continuous land empire in human history. It was a realm of astonishing speed, of vast distances, of nomadic rhythms, and of contrasts, both harsh and fascinating. But, as with all great powers, life within it was not easy. For common people, survival often meant struggle. Against the climate, against scarcity, and against the demands of empire. Even for those in positions of strength, the challenges were constant, woven into every day. As we move slowly through this journey, imagine the endless grasslands stretching beneath wide skies. The sound of hooves carrying across the plains, the flicker of fires against felt tents, and the rhythm of lives bound to the land, the animals, and the power of the Khans. We will not rush. We will take our time, exploring the details that shaped these lives, and letting them guide us gently toward calm reflection. And so, let us begin with what daily life might have been like for an ordinary herder living under the vastness of the Mongol Empire. Imagine waking on the steppe in the early morning. The air is crisp and cold, carrying the scent of grass and smoke. Above you, the sky stretches endlessly, pale blue at the edges where the sun begins to rise. There are no walls, no streets, no towers of stone, only the wide horizon and the soft curves of rolling hills. You step out of a ger, a round felt tent that is both sturdy and portable, its frame of wood covered in thick layers of wool and hide. Inside, the air is warm from the embers of last night's fire, the smell of milk and wool lingering. Outside, the wind moves freely, tugging at your clothes, reminding you of how exposed life is on this land. Your day begins not with leisure, but with labor. The animals must be tended before anything else. Horses, sheep, goats, and cattle graze across the open grass, their breath steaming in the cold air. You walk among them, your boots sinking into damp earth, your hands adjusting ropes, checking hooves, gathering strays. The rhythm of life here is bound entirely to these animals. Their milk becomes food and drink. Their hides and wool provide clothing and shelter. Their strength carries carts, and their bodies provide meat in times of need. Without them, survival on the steppe is impossible. Meals are simple: boiled mutton, salty broths, and fermented mare's milk. Arag, sharp and tangy on the tongue. The diet is not varied, but it is sustaining, drawn directly from the animals that move across the land with you. The day continues with constant motion. The gar may be dismantled, its parts loaded onto carts pulled by oxen, then carried to another part of the plain. For life is nomadic, always shifting, always following pasture and water, always adapting to the vastness of the steppe. The climate is harsh. Summers bring intense heat, the grass brittle and dry. Winters bring biting cold, snow sweeping across the land, animals struggling to find enough to eat. There is little shelter, only the strength of the tents, the warmth of fires, and the closeness of family. At night, the steppe is quiet, but never silent. The wind whistles softly. Horses stamp their hooves, dogs bark at distant shapes moving in the dark. Above, the sky fills with stars, so many and so bright that they seem to stretch forever. Families gather close in the ger, the fire flickering low, stories told in murmurs, songs sung softly against the vastness outside. To live here is to live in rhythm with the land, with animals, and with a people bound together by kinship and endurance. It is not an easy life. The comforts of cities, of steady supplies, of stone walls and markets are absent. Instead, there is only the endless plain, the cycle of seasons, and the constant work of survival. For many listening now, it is difficult to imagine. But for the people of the Mongol Empire, this was daily life. Steady, harsh, yet deeply connected to the world around them. And from this rhythm of ordinary herders, we will turn next to one who rose from these same steppes to shape the destiny of millions. Temüjin, better known as Genghis Khan. The life of Genghis Khan from the quiet routines of herders on the steppe. We turn now to a figure whose life rose from the same windswept plains, yet reached into every corner of Eurasia. Temüjin, later known to history as Genghis Khan, was born into a world of hardship, loss, and survival. His story is not one of ease, but of persistence, endurance, and unrelenting ambition. Imagine the steppe once more. The same endless horizon, the same herds, the same tents. It was into this world that Temüjin was born, sometime around the year 1162. His family was of the Borjigin clan, respected but not secure. Life was never far from danger. When Temüjin was still a boy, his father, Yasuge, was poisoned by rivals. Without his protection, the family's position collapsed. His mother, Holland, struggled to keep her children alive, scraping together what food she could, teaching them to endure the harshness of the land without the support of allies. For young Temüjin, this was a childhood marked by insecurity, often hungry, often hunted, often left to rely only on his siblings and his own determination. The rhythms of ordinary life were shaped for him by loss, and it was in this environment that he learned resilience. As Temüjin grew, he began to rebuild his family's standing. He forged alliances carefully, beginning with his marriage to Bert, a union that brought strength through kinship ties. Yet, even this was not free of struggle. Soon after their marriage, Bert was captured by a rival tribe. Temüjin pursued and rescued her, an act that became a turning point in his reputation. From there, his rise continued. He began to gather followers, not only from his own kin, but from other clans who respected his leadership. What set him apart was his ability to break with tradition. Instead of relying solely on aristocratic bloodlines, Temüjin promoted men of talent and loyalty, no matter their birth. For warriors of the steppe, this was a powerful draw. He rewarded loyalty with opportunity, and he punished betrayal with severity. By the turn of the 13th century, Temüjin had built a reputation that reached far across the steppe. But the Mongols were not a single people. They were a collection of clans and tribes, often at war with one another. Temüjin's greatest achievement was to unite them. Imagine the gatherings of warriors, their horses lined across the grasslands, their banners snapping in the wind. One by one, clans swore allegiance, until finally, in 1206, Temüjin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. The title carried not just authority, but destiny, a recognition that his power extended beyond clan and blood into something greater. From this point, the Mongol Empire began to spread with astonishing speed. To the north and west, his armies pushed into Central Asia, defeating rival tribes and kingdoms. To the south, they struck into the lands of the Jin dynasty in northern China. Later, campaigns would extend into Persia, the Middle East, and eventually the edges of Europe. His armies were unlike any the world had seen before. Mounted archers, disciplined and mobile, could cover vast distances quickly. They fought with speed, with strategy, with coordination that seemed impossible across such wide spaces. And they carried with them not only weapons, but also fear. the knowledge that to resist was often to face destruction. Yet, alongside conquest, Genghis Khan built systems that endured. He created a code of laws known as the Yasa, enforcing discipline, order, and loyalty. He encouraged trade across his vast lands, protecting merchants and caravans, making it possible for goods to travel from China to Europe under Mongol protection. His empire became not only a force of war, but a network of connection. The man behind the title, despite his legendary status, Genghis Khan remained, in many ways, a man of the steppe. He lived simply, in tents, rather than palaces, surrounded by his family and his warriors. He ate the same foods, drank the same fermented mare's milk, and continued the same nomadic rhythms. Even as his empire expanded, his identity remained tied to the land and its traditions. In later years, he remained a commander, leading campaigns personally, even as age weighed upon him. He died in 1227 during a campaign against the Western Shire dynasty. The exact circumstances of his death remain uncertain, cloaked in mystery and legend. Some say he was injured in battle, others that he fell from his horse, others still that the truth was hidden deliberately. His burial place, too, remains unknown. Some traditions say his body was carried back to Mongolia and laid to rest in secret, the site concealed so that no one could disturb him. Wherever he lies, his presence endures not in a grave, but in the vast empire he set in motion. Genghis Khan's legacy is immense. He united a fractured people, created an empire that stretched across continents, and reshaped the world in ways that are still felt. Trade routes flourished under Mongol protection. Ideas, inventions, and cultures moved more freely than before. Yet, his campaigns also left scars. Cities destroyed, populations displaced, lives ended abruptly in the sweep of conquest. The balance of his legacy is both light and shadow, achievement and devastation, endurance and fragility. It is a reminder that history rarely gives us heroes or villains alone, but always both, intertwined. From the life of Genghis Khan, we will turn next to another side of the Mongol world. Not its ruler, but its mysteries. For across the empire, legends and enigmas abound. In our next segment, we will explore one of these, the mystery of his hidden tomb, and why its location has remained one of history's most enduring secrets. Every great ruler leaves behind questions, and perhaps none are greater than the mystery of Genghis Khan's final resting place. For while we know much of his conquests, his laws, and his legacy, the place where he was laid to rest remains hidden, veiled in silence, secrecy, and legend. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, during his campaign against the Western Shire dynasty, his followers faced the question of how to honor him. Yet, unlike many rulers of history, he left no grand mausoleum, no stone pyramid, no gilded tomb. Instead, his burial was cloaked in secrecy. Tradition tells us that his body was carried back to Mongolia. Across the wide plains he had known since childhood, the caravan traveled quietly, moving at night, guarded closely by loyal soldiers. The location chosen was kept hidden, and all those who took part swore silence. Some legends go further. One tale says that the funeral party killed every traveler they encountered, so no one could reveal the direction of the burial. Another claims that rivers were diverted to flow over his grave, concealing it beneath water and earth. Others whisper that forests were planted above it, or that mountains themselves guard the site. Whether true or not, the secrecy was effective. For centuries, no one has been able to say with certainty where Genghis Khan lies. Many believe his body rests somewhere on Burkon Kaldon, a mountain in northeastern Mongolia. This was a place sacred to him, tied to the traditions of his people. He is said to have prayed there, to have sought guidance there, to have asked that it guard him in death. Imagine standing at its base today. The slopes rise steadily, covered in trees, the wind rustling softly through the branches. The air is cool, filled with the scent of pine and earth. For centuries, this place has been revered as holy, a site where rituals were carried out and where people still leave offerings. If his tomb is there, it remains hidden beneath the forested slopes, untouched by stone markers or monuments. It blends into the land itself, as if his wish was not to be remembered in a single place, but to remain part of the steppe forever. Over the years, explorers and archaeologists have sought his tomb. In the 20th and 21st centuries, teams used satellite images, ground surveys, and even remote sensing technology, hoping to detect hidden structures beneath the soil. Yet each effort has been inconclusive. Some researchers argue that to search for his grave is itself a violation of tradition. Mongolian culture often emphasizes respect for the dead, and disturbing a burial site is seen as deeply taboo. Thus, even today, many believe the tomb should remain undisturbed. Its secrecy a lasting honor to the great Khan. What makes this mystery so powerful is not simply the question of location, but what it represents. In a world where so many rulers sought immortality through monuments, pharaohs with pyramids, emperors with palaces, kings with towering graves, Genghis Khan left behind nothing of stone. Instead, his memory endures in the empire he built, the people he united, and the stories that echo still. Imagine, again, the vast steppe, no tomb, no marker, only grass bending in the wind, the sky stretching endlessly above. Somewhere beneath that earth, perhaps, lies the body of Genghis Khan. Or perhaps not. Perhaps his tomb is not a place at all, but an idea, that he belongs not to one valley, one mountain, or one monument, but to the land itself. And so the mystery endures, quietly, like the wind across the plains. It reminds us that history does not always give us answers. Sometimes it gives us silence, leaving us to wonder, to imagine, and to accept that some secrets will never be revealed. From this mystery, we will shift gently to another perspective. Not hidden tombs, but the contrast of lives within the empire. For while ordinary herders lived in hardship and rulers commanded with power, others existed in between. Merchants, officials, and envoys whose lives brought them into contact with both the humblest and the grandest of Mongol worlds. In our next segment, we will walk through the experience of such lives, exploring how the social contrasts of the empire shaped its daily rhythm. The Mongol Empire was vast, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the edges of Europe, from the frozen forests of Siberia to the deserts of Persia. Within it, lives were not uniform. They varied greatly, shaped by wealth, status, and circumstance. To understand this empire fully, we must explore the contrasts between those who endured hardship at the margins and those who lived in the shadow of power. Imagine again the ordinary herders on the steppe, men and women who rose each morning to tend their animals. Their lives were defined by survival. They lived in felt tents, wore clothing of wool and hide, and ate from the animals they kept. Their wealth was measured not in coins, but in livestock. A family with many horses, sheep, and cattle could sustain itself. A family with few lived precariously, always at risk from storms, disease, or theft. For these herders, life was repetitive but steady. Grazing herds, milking mares, boiling meat, mending clothes, moving camp with the seasons. It was not an easy life, but it was familiar, passed down from generation to generation. Now imagine a different life. that of a merchant traveling along the Silk Road under Mongol rule. Your caravan stretches across the horizon. Camels laden with silk, spices, glassware, and books. The air is filled with the sound of hooves and bells tied to animals' necks. Under the Mongol Empire, long-distance trade flourished. Merchants who once feared bandits found the roads safer, guarded by the empire's soldiers. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, allowed goods to flow more freely than before, linking China, Persia, and Europe. For merchants, life was wealthier, but also less certain. Journeys were long, stretching over months, through deserts and mountains. At night, you sleep beneath the stars. The desert air, sharp and cold. Your cargo always at risk from weather, thieves, or political shifts. And yet, this was a life of opportunity. Where herders lived simply, merchants encountered the wealth of cities, the luxuries of markets, the exchange of cultures. At the other end of society were the nobles and officials, those closest to the khans. Imagine entering a Mongol encampment where the Khan holds court. Here, tents are larger, richly decorated with silks, furs, and golden ornaments. Servants move quietly, tending fires, preparing food, arranging gifts brought by his men. The Khan sits upon a raised seat, surrounded by advisors and generals. Petitioners approach, bowing deeply, presenting their requests. Envoys from distant lands bring offerings. Bolts of silk, vases of porcelain, coins of silver. Here, decisions are made not only about local disputes, but about entire regions. Who will govern? Who will pay tribute? Who will command armies? For nobles, life carried privilege. Fine clothing, abundant food, the respect of others. But it also carried responsibility. Loyalty to the Khan, the need to command followers, the risk of sudden changes in fortune. A noble who displeased the ruler could see his wealth vanish overnight. Another layer of life in the empire belonged to foreigners who visited the Mongols. Merchants, missionaries, diplomats, and travelers all found themselves in Mongol camps and cities. Some came from Europe. Friars sent by the Pope, merchants from Venice, envoys from kings. They described the vast feasts of the Khans, the endless herds, the speed of the armies, and the strict discipline of Mongol rule. Imagine being one of these envoys, stepping into a great tent lit by torches, filled with the scent of roasted meat and spiced wine. You present your gifts, your voice steady though your heart races, knowing the Khan's decision could shape the fate of your distant homeland. To these visitors, the Mongol Empire seemed both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Immense, ordered, and unlike anything they had seen before. And so we see the contrasts clearly. The herder in his felt tent, boiling meat in a single pot, measuring wealth in the number of animals grazing outside. The merchant on the road, carrying goods across deserts and mountains, living by trade and negotiation. The noble in his richly decorated gear, deciding the fate of provinces with a single command. The foreign envoy, standing at the edge of a world both familiar and utterly alien. Each lived under the same empire, bound by the authority of the Khan, yet their daily realities were profoundly different. Imagine them all at night. On the steppe, a herder tends his fire, his children asleep beside him. On the road, a merchant lies beneath a sky of countless stars, listening to the bells of camels shifting in the dark. In the court, nobles drink and converse in low voices, while guards stand watch at the Khan's tent. And far away, an envoy writes by lamplight, recording the wonders and fears of this empire in words he will carry back home. All these lives, different as they were woven together by the vastness of the Mongol world. A tapestry of contrasts, humble and grand, fragile and powerful, simple and complex. From these social contrasts, we will turn next to another defining feature of the empire, the incredible messenger system, known as the Yam, that connected its farthest reaches. In our next segment, we will ride with the couriers of the empire, carrying messages across thousands of miles, sustaining the rhythm of communication that bound the empire together. The Mongol Empire was vast, stretching from the Pacific coast of China to the plains of Hungary, from Siberia to Persia. To rule such distances required not only armies and governors, but communication, steady, swift, and reliable. The genius of the Mongols lay not only in conquest, but in how they connected the farthest edges of their empire. At the heart of this system was the Yam, the great network of relay stations and couriers. Imagine the problem first. From Karakorum, the imperial capital, to the cities of Persia, or the mountains of the Caucasus, or the borders of China, was a journey of thousands of miles. Rivers had to be crossed, deserts endured, mountains passed. Messages carried by a single rider might take months to reach their destination. And yet, the empire could not function without communication. The Yam solved this problem with elegance. It was a network of stations spaced along the empire's great roads. At each, fresh horses, supplies, and shelter awaited the couriers. A single rider could carry a message only so far before handing it to another, who carried it onward. In this way, messages moved with astonishing speed across enormous distances. Imagine yourself as one of these couriers. The dawn breaks over the steppe, the air sharp and clear. Your horse shifts beneath you, ready for the long ride ahead. In your satchel is a packet sealed with the emblem of the Khan, a message of state, of war, of tribute. You ride swiftly, the hooves of your horse striking rhythm into the earth. Grasslands pass, rivers flash in the light, villages drift by in the distance. The wind whistles past your ears, the rhythm of the ride steady and unbroken. After hours, your horse grows weary. At last, you see a Yam station ahead, a cluster of tents or wooden huts, marked by the empire's banners. Here, attendants meet you quickly. You hand over the message, receive food and water, and mount a fresh horse. With no time lost, the message continues onward, carried by another rider at full speed. In this way, information crossed the empire faster than armies could march, faster than merchants could travel, binding together lands otherwise too vast to govern. The Yam was immense. Some accounts speak of over 1,000 stations. Stretching across Asia, each was stocked with horses, food, and shelter, paid for by the empire and sustained by the labor of local communities. It was, in many ways, an early form of a postal system, not for ordinary letters, but for the business of empire. Messages carried by the Yam included decrees from the Khan, orders for generals, reports from governors, and updates from distant envoys. In times of crisis, the system allowed decisions to move swiftly across thousands of miles, giving the Mongols an advantage that few others possessed. Not everyone could use the Yam to access it. One needed a tablet of authority known as a paisa, a small piece of metal stamped with the seal of the Khan. It granted the bearer the right to requisition horses, supplies, and shelter from the stations. Envoys, generals, and merchants under Mongol protection often carried such tablets. For those without one, the roads were long and uncertain. But for those who bore the paisa, the empire itself opened. Doors unlocked, horses provided, food offered freely. The life of a courier was demanding. The rides were long, the pace unrelenting. They faced storms, rivers in flood, attacks from bandits or wild animals. Yet the rhythm of the Yam was constant, like a heartbeat across the empire. Imagine riding at night, the stars bright above, the air cold against your face. The only sound is the steady pounding of hooves, the creak of leather, the soft rush of wind. At intervals, lanterns glow faintly ahead, marking the next station. You pause only long enough to hand over the message, and then it speeds onward, never stopping. The yam was more than a postal service. It was a symbol of Mongol control, a reminder that the Khan's authority stretched across mountains and deserts, through forests and plains. It allowed rulers to govern lands they could not see, to command armies thousands of miles away, to link cultures that had once been separated by distance. It also fostered trade. Merchants under Mongol protection could move more safely, knowing that the same system that carried messages also supported caravans. The Silk Road flourished, not only because of the peace imposed by Mongol arms, but because of the infrastructure created by the yam. Think of it now as a web, an invisible network stretching across the land. Each station a node, each courier a thread, all connected, all moving in steady rhythm. From China to Europe, from Siberia to Persia, the yam linked the empire together. And yet, like so much of the Mongol achievement, it was built on simplicity. Fresh horses, steady riders, clear roads, discipline. It was not a monument of stone, but a rhythm of movement, repeated endlessly, day and night. From the yam, we turn next to another defining feature of the empire, its armies. For while messages carried authority, it was the soldiers who enforced it. In our next segment, we will explore the structure of the Mongol military, how it fought, how it moved, and how it sustained the conquests that reshaped the world. The Mongol Empire is remembered most for its armies, swift, disciplined, and seemingly unstoppable. Yet to picture them only as waves of destruction is to miss their true nature. Their strength lay not only in ferocity, but in organization, in rhythm, in discipline, as steady as the beating of hooves across the steppe. The Mongol military was built on a system of tens. Every soldier belonged to a unit. 10 men formed an arban. 10 arbans made a company of 100. A zuwin, 10 zuwins made 1,000. A mingan, and 10 mingans formed a tumen, 10,000 men. Imagine the precision of such an organization. Orders flowed clearly, responsibilities were defined. A soldier knew not only his duty to the empire, but his place within a chain of command that stretched across entire continents. This structure allowed the Mongols to move as one, whether in small groups or in vast armies. It was discipline, not sheer numbers alone, that made them so formidable. Imagine waking as a Mongol soldier on campaign. The sun rises over an encampment of felt tents, smoke drifting upward from small fires, horses graze nearby, their tack hanging on posts, their breath steaming in the morning air. Breakfast is simple: dried meat softened in broth, milk from mares, sometimes rice or grain from conquered lands. Weapons are checked carefully. The composite bow, its limbs of wood, horn, and sinew, the quiver filled with arrows, the curved saber, sharp and ready, a small axe or dagger tucked into a belt. The soldier's day is defined by readiness. Training is constant, even on the march. Archery from horseback is practiced again and again, until it becomes second nature. The bond with one's horse is central, for the Mongol soldier is not a warrior on foot, but a rider, his strength inseparable from that of the animal beneath him. The horses themselves were small compared to those of Europe or Persia, yet hardy and enduring. Each soldier kept several, riding one while others rested. When one grew weary, he switched to another, allowing the army to move with astonishing speed. Imagine the sound of a tumen in motion, tens of thousands of hooves, drumming against the earth, a steady rhythm rolling across plains and valleys. The pace is relentless, day after day, covering distances that other armies could scarcely imagine. It was this mobility, more than sheer numbers, that made the Mongols seem to appear from nowhere, overwhelming opponents before they could prepare. The Mongols fought with cunning as well as strength. Feigned retreats, ambushes, and circlements. These were the patterns of their warfare. An enemy might see the Mongols flee, chase them eagerly, only to find themselves drawn into a trap where hidden riders closed from all sides. The composite bow gave them reach. Arrows could be loosed at great distance, striking with force and accuracy. Armies unused to such speed and precision often faltered, unable to withstand the storm of arrows before the Mongols even closed to melee. And yet, when close combat came, they were ready. Sabers flashing, lances striking, discipline unbroken. Discipline was absolute. An army lived by strict codes. Desertion was punished by death. Cowardice was punished by death. Betrayal was punished by death. The law of the Yasa applied to soldiers as much as to commoners. Every man was responsible for his comrades. If one failed, the unit bore the consequences. This created not only fear, but unity, a sense that survival depended not on the individual alone, but on the loyalty of the group. How did such armies move across entire continents? The answer lay in preparation and adaptation. They lived off the land, taking what they needed, but they also carried dried meat, fermented milk, and grain. Their horses provided milk and even blood, drawn carefully in small amounts to sustain riders on long marches. Caravans of supplies followed, organized with the same discipline as the army itself. Blacksmiths, herders, cooks, and servants all moved with the soldiers, creating not just an army, but a mobile society on campaign. The Mongols understood the power of fear. They used it deliberately, spreading stories of their ferocity, offering surrender with promises of mercy, but punishing resistance with harsh consequences. Cities that resisted were often destroyed. Those that surrendered quickly were spared. This reputation traveled faster than their armies. Some towns opened their gates before the first arrow was fired, unwilling to risk the fate of those who had resisted. For the ordinary Mongol soldier, life was not one of endless conquest, but of routine. Marching, riding, drilling, camping, breaking camp, riding again. Days blurred together, marked only by the rhythm of hooves and the commands of officers. Victories brought plunder, but they also brought fatigue, wounds, and loss. At night, the camp settled into silence. Fires burned low. Men huddled close to one another, horses tied nearby, their silhouettes dark against the starlit sky. Sleep came not as comfort, but as necessity, to prepare for another day of the same rhythm. The Mongol military machine reshaped the world. It carried their empire across continents, but it also reshaped warfare itself. Its emphasis on mobility, discipline, and organization influenced armies for centuries after, and yet, behind the stories of conquest lay lives of ordinary soldiers. Men who rose each day to the same tasks, who rode the same miles, who endured the same hardships. Their lives remind us that empires are built not only by rulers, but by countless individuals, anonymous yet essential. From the thunder of hooves, we will turn to a quieter rhythm. For while the armies spread fear, the empire also carried trade, ideas, and cultures across great distances. In our next segment, we will travel with merchants and caravans along the Silk Road, exploring how the Mongol Empire became not only a power of war, but a bridge of connection. When most think of the Mongol Empire, they imagine battles, conquests, and armies sweeping across the land. But the empire was also a bridge, a vast network that connected distant regions, linking China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe in ways that had never been seen before. This connection flowed most clearly along the Great Silk Road. Imagine the caravans that wound their way across deserts, through mountains, and over plains. Long lines of camels, their bells chiming softly, laden with bundles wrapped in cloth. Merchants walked alongside, their voices murmuring in different tongues. Horses stamped their hooves, carts creaked under weight, and the air carried the mingled scents of wool, spices, and dust. Under the Mongols, these routes became safer than they had been in centuries. The Pax Mongolica, the peace of the Mongols, meant that merchants could travel from one end of the empire to the other under the Khan's protection. The Yam system, the network of relay stations and couriers, extended this security, providing not only communication but also shelter for caravans. The roads carried more than silk. From China came porcelain, tea, paper, and gunpowder. From Central Asia, horses, carpets, and precious stones. From India, spices, gems, and textiles. From Persia, glassware, fruits, and metals. From Europe, wool, silver, and crafts. Each item passed through many hands, exchanged, sold, carried onward. Imagine opening a bundle in a marketplace in Samarkand. Rich silk shimmering in the sunlight, its colors deep and vibrant. Spices whose scents fill the air. Cinnamon, saffron, pepper, goods that began thousands of miles away arrived as treasures in distant cities, shaping diets, fashions, and technologies across the world. Yet perhaps more important than goods were the ideas that traveled along these roads. Scholars, monks, doctors, and envoys moved with the caravans. They carried not just wares, but knowledge. Papermaking spread from China westward. Gunpowder, once a secret, reached new lands and reshaped warfare. Mathematics, astronomy, and medicine flowed between Islamic scholars and Chinese thinkers. Even foods traveled. Fruits and grains carried across regions, blending into new cuisines. Imagine a marketplace not only filled with goods, but with conversations. Merchants from Persia speak with those from India, exchanging not only coins, but stories, traditions, recipes, and beliefs. A Venetian trader hears of lands he has never seen. A Chinese monk records the customs of peoples in distant valleys. The Silk Road was not simply a highway of commerce, but of culture. Along the Silk Road, cities blossomed. Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar. Names that even now carry the weight of history. They became hubs where caravans gathered, where merchants rested, where goods were bought and sold. Imagine Samarkand at dusk. The sun sets behind domes and minarets, casting long shadows across courtyards. In the markets, lanterns flicker as merchants pack away their wares. The scent of bread drifts from ovens, mingling with the sharper smell of spices. Caravans settle outside the walls, their animals resting, their drivers gathering around fires to share food and stories. In such cities, cultures met and mingled, creating blends of art, architecture, and belief that shaped the world for centuries. The Mongols did not create the Silk Road, but they revitalized it. By uniting so many lands under one authority, they removed many of the barriers that had once made long journeys perilous. Their armies enforced order, their laws protected merchants, their stations provided rest. Even Marco Polo, the Venetian traveler, could journey across Asia and record the wonders he saw. Thanks to the security the Mongols maintained, his stories, brought back to Europe, would later inspire others to seek those distant lands by sea. But connection also carried risks. Along the same routes, that spread goods and ideas, disease also traveled. The most infamous was the Black Death, which spread across Eurasia in the 14th century, carried in part along the very trade networks the Mongols had encouraged. What brought wealth and knowledge also brought suffering. This duality, connection as both gift and burden, was part of the empire's legacy. Picture, finally, a caravan at night. The desert air is cool, the stars bright above, the fires of merchants flickering softly. Camels kneel in rows, their shapes dark against the sand. Voices drift quietly, in many languages, as men share food and stories. Some speak of profits made, others of distant families, others of lands they hope to reach. The Silk Road is more than geography. It is a rhythm, a meeting place, a slow current of humanity moving across the land. The Mongol Empire gave it new life, ensuring that the voices of distant cultures could reach one another more easily than ever before. From the roads of trade, we turn now to the world of faith and learning under Mongol rule. In our next segment, we will step into the cultural and religious diversity of the empire, exploring how different beliefs, traditions, and knowledge coexisted, and sometimes clashed, under the Khans. The Mongol Empire was not only an empire of war and roads, but also of people. Millions across vast lands, each with their own languages, customs, and beliefs. Unlike many empires that sought to impose a single culture, the Mongols ruled over diversity. Their tolerance, sometimes practical and sometimes deliberate, created a realm where many faiths and traditions coexisted. Genghis Khan really focused on practicality over religious beliefs. He recognized the power of belief in holding communities together. Rather than enforce one faith, he allowed many Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, Taoists, and shamans all found space under his rule. Imagine entering a Mongol encampment where envoys from different lands gather. A Christian priest carries a cross, a Muslim imam recites prayers, a Buddhist monk turns a prayer wheel. Each speaks in different rhythms, each carries different traditions, and yet all are permitted to remain, each serving the empire in their way. This tolerance was not only kindness, but policy. It ensured loyalty from diverse peoples, reducing rebellion and weaving together lands that might otherwise have resisted. At the heart of Mongol spirituality was Tengriism, the worship of the eternal blue sky, and reverence for spirits of the earth, ancestors, and nature. It was not a faith of temples or scriptures, but of open skies, sacred mountains, and rituals carried out in harmony with the land. Imagine a ceremony on the steppe. A shaman beats a drum softly. Smoke from burning herbs drifts into the air. The people bow their heads, murmuring prayers to the spirits of earth and sky, asking for health, good weather, protection in war. The wind rustles the grass, carrying the smoke upward toward the endless blue above. This belief blended easily with the empire's tolerance, allowing other religions to take root, while the Mongols kept their own connection to the land. Diversity also meant an exchange of knowledge. The Mongol courts welcomed scholars, doctors, engineers, and artisans from every region they ruled. Chinese engineers built siege weapons for Mongol armies. Persian administrators taught methods of taxation and record-keeping. Muslim astronomers charted the stars for navigation. Christian envoys carried news and diplomacy between East and West. Imagine the consort at Karakoram, the empire's capital. Inside its halls sit men from distant lands, speaking through translators, showing maps, presenting books, describing inventions. A world of languages, ideas, and skills converges in a single place, creating something new from their mingling. While the Mongols themselves valued mobility and simplicity, The lands they conquered preserved rich traditions of art and culture. In Persia, poets like Rumi wrote verses that would endure for centuries, blending spirituality and lyricism. In China, painters and calligraphers continued their crafts, even under Mongol rule. In Central Asia, craftsmen carved intricate designs into wood, stone, and textiles. The Mongols became patrons, not by creating art themselves, but by supporting the flow of artists, artisans, and traditions across their empire. They moved craftsmen from one region to another, sometimes forcibly, sometimes through patronage, spreading techniques and styles across boundaries. Diversity was not only seen in courts and cities, but in everyday life. In a single marketplace, you might hear Mongolian, Persian, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian spoken within earshot. Stalls might sell silk dyed in China, spices from India, glassware from Syria, and wool from the steppe. Foods blended, rice dishes flavored with lamb, bread baked in clay ovens, noodles carried westward, dumplings carried east. Families intermarried, traditions mixed, and new customs arose from the fusion. It was a world of crossings, not boundaries. Yet coexistence was not always without tension. Tolerance could be withdrawn when it threatened the empire's stability. Religious leaders were favored when loyal, but punished when rebellious. Local traditions sometimes clashed with Mongol rule, creating friction in provinces far from the Khan's court. Still, compared to many empires, the Mongols maintained a remarkable openness, allowing the diversity of their subjects to flourish under one vast umbrella of power. Imagine again a night on the steppe, within the Mongol encampment. Around one fire, a Muslim trader recites prayers. Around another, a Buddhist monk chants softly. Nearby, a Mongol family offers milk to the spirits of the land, bowing their heads toward the sky. Each different, each distinct, yet all within the same empire, sharing the same horizon, breathing the same cold night air. This was the Mongol world, not uniform, not narrow, but vast, varied, and full of voices. When we imagine the Mongols, we often picture war and destruction. Yet there was another side to their rule. A period of unusual peace and order across much of Eurasia, known as the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. This peace was not gentle in its origins. It came after conquest, after cities fell, after resistance was subdued. But once regions submitted, they found a kind of stability unusual for their time. Merchants could travel across thousands of miles with relative safety. Envoys could move between courts without fear of attack. Even ordinary people benefited from predictable rule enforced by the Khan's authority. At the heart of this order was the yasa, the code of laws attributed to Genghis Khan. Though its details were often kept secret, it enforced discipline and justice across the empire. Theft was punished. Violence against merchants was punished. Disobedience of the Khan's authority was punished. Imagine a roadside village under Mongol protection. A merchant caravan arrives. Weary from weeks of travel, the villagers provide shelter and supplies, not out of charity, but because the law demands it. They know that if harm comes to merchants, consequences will follow, swift, certain, and severe. Fear of punishment created, paradoxically, an environment of safety. Under this peace, trade flourished, as we have seen. But so did diplomacy and cultural exchange. Rulers who might never have spoken before could send ambassadors, carried safely under Mongol protection. Maps, letters, and knowledge crossed boundaries that had once been closed. For ordinary people, life continued in its familiar rhythms. Tending herds, ploughing fields, weaving cloth, but with the knowledge that the empire's reach extended even to the smallest village, shaping the environment in which they lived. Picture the empire at its height. From the shores of the Pacific to the plains of Hungary, roads alive with caravans, stations alive with couriers, cities alive with trade. The Pax Mongolica was not peace in the modern sense, but it was stability. And stability, in a world so often fractured, allowed connections that would outlast the empire itself. No empire lasts forever. The Mongols, who once seemed invincible, also faced decline. Their fall was not sudden, but gradual, marked by fractures, divisions, and challenges too great to overcome. After the death of Genghis Khan, and later his grandson Kublai Khan, the empire split into separate khanates: the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Yuan dynasty in China. Each was ruled by descendants of Genghis, but unity faded. Rivalries grew, loyalties shifted, and the vast empire became less a single realm and more a collection of related states. Enemies adapted to Mongol tactics. Rival powers strengthened. The Black Death spread along the same trade routes that once brought wealth, devastating populations and weakening economies. The very mobility that gave the Mongols strength was less suited to governing cities and settled populations over the long term. As generations passed, rulers became less tied to the steppe, more absorbed in the luxuries of sedentary life, less connected to the traditions that had forged the empire's unity. Imagine an outpost along the Silk Road, once thriving with caravans. Now the road is quiet, the merchants fewer, the guards less vigilant. The yam stations fall into disrepair, the couriers less frequent. The empire's great web begins to fray, strand by strand, until only fragments remain. By the 14th century, the great Mongol Empire had faded. The khanates endured for a time, but the dream of a united empire stretching across continents was gone. The decline of the Mongols was not dramatic collapse, but the quiet fading of strength. Their legacy, however, remained. In the roots they secured, the connections they fostered, the cultural exchanges they enabled. Their empire dissolved, but its echoes never vanished. From this long arc, from rise to peace to decline, we arrive now at reflection. Let us gather these threads together gently and ease our minds toward rest as we step into the soothing conclusion. We have wandered far tonight, across the wide grasslands of Mongolia, into the felt tents of herders, and through the early struggles of Temüjin, who rose to become Genghis Khan. We have followed the mystery of his hidden tomb, glimpsed the contrasts between nobles, merchants, and commoners, and ridden with couriers along the Yam. We have heard the thunder of armies in motion, the quiet murmur of caravans along the Silk Road, and the prayers of many faiths whispered beneath the same open sky. All of these pieces, harsh and gentle, fragile and enduring, form the great mosaic of the Mongol Empire. At its core, the empire was born of the steppe, the endless grass, the biting wind, the rhythm of hooves, a land that forged resilience, mobility, and unity. The Mongols carried this spirit outward, weaving it into every region they touched. Yet the empire was not only conquest, it was also connection. Trade routes revived, ideas exchanged, cultures mingled, creating currents that still shape our world today. From the foods we eat to the stories we tell, traces of that age remain quietly with us. As always, history offers both light and shadow. The Mongols built, but they also destroyed. They connected, but they also conquered. They tolerated, but they also punished. Their story is not simple, but layered. And in those layers, we find the richness of the past. A reminder that empires are not merely names in books, but lives lived in rhythm, hardship, and hope, bringing the journey to rest. Now, let us set aside the vastness of the Mongol Empire. Let the riders, the caravans, the scholars, and the shamans fade quietly into the distance. Picture, instead, the steppe at night. The stars bright, the air cool, the grass whispering softly in the wind. A fire flickers low in a felt tent, casting a warm glow, while families rest close together, the sounds of the world outside fading into stillness. The empire is gone now, as all empires eventually fade. But the night remains, endless, quiet, and calm. It is this calm we carry with us now. As you listen, let yourself drift. Let go of the weight of battles and rulers, of roads and mysteries. Hold only the rhythm, steady, soothing, unhurried, the rhythm of history as lullaby. You are here, safe, resting. The past belongs to itself. The present belongs to your peace. And to guide you gently into sleep, I have placed calm music at the end of this video. Let it carry you softly, like the steady movement of hooves across the plain, like the quiet tide of wind over the grass, into deeper and deeper rest. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and drift, as the steppe itself drifts beneath the endless blue sky into sleep. Good night.